Approvals. I am attorney Amanda Shaffer. Today we have another great case to talk about. Before I get to it, just a quick reminder, make sure that you like us and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Hi, Lucy, thanks for watching. Twitter, where else? YouTube, so you don't miss any more of our lives or our videos. You can also catch any lives or videos that you've missed by going to one of our social media accounts, and there's plenty of good information on there for you to take a look at. So today's case is a very interesting one. It's about a client who is a native and citizen of Senegal. So this client entered the U.S. in 2013 with an F1 student visa and started attending school. In 2015, he applied for asylum, and I will get to what his asylum claim was about shortly, because that's kind of what makes this case, part of what makes this case pretty interesting. He then married a U.S. citizen in 2019. She petitioned for him and he filed for his green card. And the first notable thing I wanted to talk about this case is the fact that there really wasn't that much documentary evidence, and the client only had one interview and it was approved that day. And I have a lot of discussions with people about how much evidence is needed, or why did this my friends get approved and they had no evidence and I gave them evidence but I didn't. And this is I think a good example of what goes on. So first of all, they got married in I think it was September 2019. We started the filings like a month or two later, and then we filed it by January of 2020. So in the world of application preparation, it was a pretty quick timeline from the day they got married. And like many other immigrants here without lawful status or in non-immigrant status, they had trouble doing things like making a joint bank account and all those types of joint, obviously there's no joint taxes or anything because the client didn't have a social security number yet. So we were working with minimal amount of evidence. And basically what we did submit was a joint apartment lease, which is very important, joint checking and savings account, except all we had was the letter from the bank that they opened the account because they had opened it like a month before, a joint T-Mobile account overview, so not even a bill. Again, they had recently joined their accounts. And then we had photographs of them on their wedding day with the petitioner's son from another relationship. So on the surface, that's not that much evidence. However, it's all in context and it all matters on the specifics of the case. In this case, there was a good reason that they didn't have that much evidence to begin with. There hadn't been that long since they were married, and he didn't have a social security number yet. And we see this a lot, and I always push clients to give me more. I always say, go get some affidavits. You can do this, you can do that. But in this case, they wanted to go ahead with it, and they were fine because the documentary evidence is only part of the picture. Obviously, the second part of the picture is the interview. And they went to the interview and they were able to answer all the questions without a problem. And, that a lot of times when I talk about this, I would focus on the documentary evidence because USCIS will, but don't get me wrong, if you go into that interview with your spouse, no matter how much paper you give them, if you guys can't answer questions about each other, it's never going to get approved. So it's not always that you need a mountain of evidence. And by the way, they did bring updated evidence with them to the interview. This wasn't like we submitted 4 pieces of paper and that was the end of it. It got approved. No, we told them you need to bring these bills. It's okay. You only have a letter from the bank that you opened it now, but by the time you get to your interview, you're going to have months and months and months of bank statements. Use your account, bring that to the interview. And they did. So don't get discouraged just because you don't have a lot of physical evidence at the moment. The important thing is that you work with an experienced attorney to know what you can get what you can, and then build up the rest of it, because you're going to have another time when you're called in for that interview. And although ideally you have everything you can possibly have up front, You're always going to be updating it at the interview, number one. And number two, that's just not the reality in some situations. So the best thing you can do is get the best package together that you possibly can. If you can't get a joint bank account, you can't get a joint bank account. It's not going to hurt you, but you should get one when you're able to, type of thing. And that'll be down the line. So that was the first really interesting thing. Now, the second thing that's very interesting about this case, I mentioned earlier that this client had applied for asylum in 2015. And he actually applied for asylum at the time where things got really backed up. So he actually had never had an asylum interview yet. He was still waiting. And that was also when, after that, when the previous administration changed the interview like schedule around. So before he was waiting like 3 years, and then he got put to the back of the pile, was waiting even longer. Point is, he didn't have his asylum interview. However, his asylum case was about him being gay, and that he couldn't return to his country because in his country they discriminate and harm gay people. And in this case, he married a female, and that's what his marriage case was based on. And that could create a problem depending on the situation. So we had to talk with him about this too. We told him, like, the asylum office is a separate office than who's going to decide your green card. It's technically a private thing, but at the same time, they're allowed to check information, like, to see if you lied on things. They compare applications, and they may look at your asylum application. They might know about it, and they may bring it up. And we said, although we now know our understanding of sexuality is it's more fluid. You're not necessarily gay or straight. USCIS doesn't necessarily understand that. And also, obviously, had to make sure with my client, I can't represent you if this is a fake marriage. If you really are gay, that's fine, but you can't do this. So it turns out he likes both men and women. He considers himself a bisexual, which I've also dealt with before with these types of cases. And that's 100% okay. You're going to have to be ready to explain it. He was lucky they didn't give him a real hard time about it, but they could have, because either they're worried that your asylum application is fake, or they're worried that your marriage case is fake. You can't just file a fake asylum application, years later file a different type of case, like a marriage-based case, and then think that your fake asylum case won't come back to bite you. That's not true. In fact, once he got his green card, we withdrew his asylum application simply because he didn't need it anymore. But we told him, you're so far so good, you got your 2-year green card, but just because we withdrew it, just because you got the 2-year green card, it doesn't mean they're not going to question it later on in your life. So you're going to have to just be ready to explain it. And his explanation is perfectly fine, but he has to be ready that it can come up and it could be a thing. And make sure your wife knows the situation, because that doesn't look good when your wife didn't know that you like men and women. That can be a problem. That's an intimate thing that they expect you to talk about with your spouse. So, I was worried about this client going into the interview for the 2 reasons: the lack of evidence and the previous asylum application. But like I said, we made sure that he understood what to expect and that he knew how to explain it to them, because where he came from, even, he didn't know you could be more than just gay or straight. He thought it was one or the other. And that was one of the things he learned when he came to the US. So he had to learn how to also explain it in the event it came up. It wasn't a big deal at this interview. They're going to have an I-751 interview, most likely, for the 10-year green card. If he naturalizes, he'll have a naturalization. Until he's a US citizen, it's something that can be brought up, because if they don't believe him one way or the other, they can consider one or the other fraud, and that can put him into a problem. So, like I said, I'm not really worried about it going forward. It's just a matter of being aware. So that is all today for notable approvals. I'll hopefully be back tomorrow with another one, but definitely this week. Make sure, again, like us, follow us on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, so that you don't miss any more of our lives. And we're also going to be back with a Q&A discussion either later this week or early next week. So keep your eye out on our social media so that you don't miss those as well. And MD, Mr. Jamin, if you need a work permit to visa to come here, I suggest that you get an employer to sponsor you. And once you get a job and the employer sponsors you, we can certainly help you with that. If you have any other questions, thank you, Eliana, one of our contestants on Are You Smarter Than a Naturalized Citizen? She did fantastic. If you have any other questions, our email and phone number are scrolling across the bottom of your screen. Feel free to contact us and have a great day.